Hello there, everybody. Hopefully you can see us and hear us well, which seems to be the usual talk of today now with all the VC meetings that everybody's having. So we'll just start off with a quick bit of housekeeping. So all the mics are muted. That works best generally from our experience. On the panel, which is normally on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a question box in there, so you can submit questions as we go through this. If you can't see anything, it might be that it's closed up. There should be a little orange box with a white arrow in it. If you click on that, it'll pop out, and you'll be able to see where you can add your questions as we go. So basically, we put this together because we've been receiving lots of different questions and lots of the same similar sorts of themes as well. And we just thought it might be a bit of a nicer way to do it than sort of kind of just give PowerPoint presentations, to do a bit of a chat between me and Michael to try and answer those questions, just to give people the knowledge that they might need to take things forward. So because we're doing this slightly differently, we realised that we normally kind of just get straight to it. So what I've got is I've got a little bit of background on me and Michael for you. So there you go. So Michael's background. So he graduated in environmental biology from Essex University in 1997, and then he worked as a microbiologist for 3 years analysing Legionella samples. He then went on to Northumbrian Water to head up the water regulations team. He represented NWL on the RAS technical support group. The highlight being heavily involved in the water systems design of 2012 Olympics. Brilliant, nice, didn't know that one, Michael. Then became a panelist on BSI and helped in writing the BS on water use for temporary events. And for the last 7 years, he's managed the water systems team, which is our Legionella team at Northumbrian Water, and obviously primarily involved there with Legionella control as well as other waterborne pathogens. I'm Andrew Sinclair. I graduated with a degree in environmental engineering from Newcastle University in 2003. And then I started working for Northumbrian Water in stack emissions monitoring. Oddly enough, my degree is in treating water and wastewater, and I've never used it for the company. And then in 2014, I moved into business development to further not use it for the company. So that's just a little bit of background about me and Michael. So I'll move on to the questions. The questions, what we've done is we got a lot that were quite similar, like I said, so we kind of collated them together, and then we had a few that were kind of slightly more specific. So we've got a few questions for you. I'm just going to ask them to Michael. Michael's going to give us all of his expert knowledge, but if you do have any sort of follow-up questions or anything like that, do just ask them in the question box, and I'll fire them over to Michael. So first question. If the building is being closed, do I need a new risk assessment?
Yep, thank you for that introduction, Andrew. Yeah, it's just going back to the introduction. It's quite funny about the Olympic Games, because it was one of the most nerve-wracking periods of my career ever. That so back in 2012, I was in charge of one of the sites. All good to go. There was royal family there watching, and then the guy who was basically in charge of the commission of the water system gave me a phone call, said, just let you know we're turning everything off now. So I'm like, you're turning the water system off? Yeah. So the idea is if we turn it off now, it saves us time later on in the day draining it down. So yeah, but potentially we're going to have a nil supply with royal family with I'm in charge. I said, yeah, it'll be fine. So that was the first, the royal family, the Olympic Games had just started, and I was already getting questions about turning water supplies off just to save them a bit of labour. So that was quite an interesting time. It was very seat of your pants. But yeah, thank you for that. So going on to your original question. Yeah. If the building's being closed, we need to do a new risk assessment. The answer's probably not a new risk assessment. I think what we're looking at with Legionella risk assessments, if there's been a change, well, there are a few things which would instigate a new risk or a risk assessment review, and one of those is a change or modification to the system. So I would suggest that if a water system has been closed and turned off, you've got a difference in use, then I would suggest that has been a change in water systems, and therefore I would suggest it would be a risk assessment review. So I think that would be the first thing. It wouldn't necessarily need a new one, but it would certainly need to revisit because basically the control parameters potentially have been changed. So I think that would initiate that, and it would be a system review. Yeah.
So is that directly from sort of the fact that buildings have just been closed because of COVID, that it would require that review of the risk assessment?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the original risk assessment, when the person originally did it, they would have gone in under what I'd call a normal system use. and then they would give a score on turnover. So do you remember the risk parameters for Legionella growth are based on a few things. One of them, which is turnover, temperature, population susceptibility, and that's sort of kind of an aerosol generation. If you've changed one of those significantly, which is turnover, then basically your original risk assessment has been kind of thrown out of kilter. So in that respect, it would suggest a review. And again, because if water systems are not being used, it can affect your temperature profiling as well. Certainly with regards to cold temperatures, if water's not been turned over on your cold system, then you're going to get your colds creeping up temperature-wise. Remember, they should be kept stored, so it should be coming out of your outlets under 20 degrees. So if you've got, especially this time of year, you've got water that's sitting around stagnant, it will creep up. And during routine use, we call it seasonal variation. So that's something to think about. But certainly, yeah, that should be revisited and looked over again, I would recommend.
Okay, brilliant. The second one is, so we had a couple of these, and we've combined it into one question, but so we shut our building in March and haven't been back. Should we be doing anything? So that's been quite a general, broad comment that we've had from quite a few different businesses out there. So,
I mean, that's a good one. So buildings closed because of the big lockdown. Ideal, in an ideal situation, then what should have happened, and again, it probably didn't happen for a little while. No, it didn't happen for a lot of buildings because Boris on the Monday night basically closed the country down pretty much overnight, didn't he? People didn't have a lot of time to plan and prep. I think I for one didn't see it coming as quick as it did, and we thought, yeah, might not, but it really did, didn't it? So I think people left the buildings in quite a hasty fashion, which has been a challenge. So what should have happened, an ideal world, is that these buildings should have had a flushing program in place. So if turnover is not happening as it should have been, which obviously wouldn't, then we can simulate use by doing a hygiene flush. So do you remember in HSG and all kind of Legionella documentation, we talk about little used outlets. That's any outlet that's not been used within a week, unless it's healthcare. Healthcare is twice a week. So if it's not been used in a weekly fashion, then it should be put on a little used outlet register and flushed. So for a majority of buildings, that could be every single outlet. We're doing a lot of work at the moment with housing associations in shared living. So you get communal areas which have just basically been pretty much locked off. So in that respect, it would be only those outlets that would be part on the little used outlet regime. Because your other outlets, potentially like individuals' properties, are still being used quite heavily. So in that respect, it's just a matter of identifying outlets that have not been used and put them on a regime. So the old documentation, or the old regime, if you, what do we always say? If you've not signed your name against it, you've not done it. So exactly. Anything like that, you need to sign your name against it. So for a flushing register, what we'll be looking at, and again, I notice you've put all the documentation online that you've got flushing guidance. Yep, thank you. You've got a great document online. Nice. Basically, it's a table, so you can identify little used outlets, and you will take a temperature, ideally, to find out what the supplying acid temperature is. So if, for instance, it's for argument's sake, it's a storage system, the storage system might be, I don't know, say 17 degrees. So what you would be doing, you'd be flushing the outlet from that storage tank until it reaches the temperatures, which in this case could be 17 degrees. Time it. However long that takes on your watch, and your stopwatch, whatever it is, might be, I don't know, say for instance 35 seconds. You write your 35 seconds in there, job done, and then you put your temperature in there, sign your name against it, go on to the next one. That needs to be done the whole way around the building. Okay. So the whole point of the timing is it's just to make sure that you're flushing it and not unduly wasting water, because from my water regulations background, it's an offence to waste water. So just flush the water.
Yeah.
Yep. Flush the water until it reaches the supplying acid temperature. Same theory for the hots. Okay, so if your chlorified running up, say 62, run the outlet until it comes to 62. And you'll be right then. That's the best way of doing it. So that's what I would suggest you do.
I assume that's just to ensure that the entire length of pipe to that outlet has been completely flushed, because then you know that by the temperature that the water that was within that segment of pipe, say, has been completely cleaned through with fresh.
Yeah, I mean, an example could be that you've got a long pipe run with a fitting on the end that's been used. but you might have a little upstand that's hardly ever used. So you basically might have a length of pipe that's only 3 or 4 foot, if not even that. It might only take you 5 or 6 seconds to turn it over. Back in the day, you'd have been flushing for 2, 3, and 4 minutes. Well, all you're doing is wasting water. That's just totally unnecessary. So the whole point of it is just to flush off the stagnant water in that particular length of pipe. And again, it's just to simulate use.
Great.
Okay.
I've got another one here, which is, we're an independent gym and we're not going to be allowing our members to use the toilet facilities. Do we need to do anything else?
That's a good question. I think that the thing to remember with this is you can't, when you lock off areas of buildings, okay, and start refusing or denying access to part of the areas, you can't really guarantee that's going to happen. So I think certainly for gyms, I'm aware that certainly for my gym, I'll be going back next week, they're encouraging you to not use the changing rooms, but certainly if you're the disabled areas will still be used, so that there'll be a provision for that areas. So and again, they're potentially higher risk. So what I would suggest everybody does for gyms is to make sure that all outlets are going through a suitable protocol to reduce Legionella bacteria. We shouldn't really be looking at water systems in isolation. So well, that part's okay, that part's not okay, it doesn't matter because nobody's going there. If you get areas of low use and little use, then you're going to get bacteria that are potentially migrating around the system. So I think what I'm saying is it's the whole system approach. So what I'll be looking at that certainly shower areas, particular shower areas, even if they're not used, so they should be flushed and given a thorough turning over. And the thing to think about that is if this building's not been used for a while, which I dare say it hasn't, then a proper recommissioning program should be taking place. So what I would suggest, if you've got storage in there or a means of generating aerosols, showers, then certainly if you've got storage and a large volume of water, it's not been turned over for a while, then I would be really looking at a disinfection program for these sort of situations. Really with a sampling, a few samples as well to be taken just for real compliance and belt and braces approach, to verify that the recommissioning process has taken place correctly and efficiently. So I'll be looking at. So answer to your question, kind of, I think really you should be making sure that all areas are suitable for use and basically keep them flushing and turning over.
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? It's kind of like, just because you think, well, I'm not going to use that bit, it's not going to stop the bacteria from working their way back through the system to a place that you are using. So you've just got to treat it as a whole. You can't treat it as its kind of constituent parts or areas.
Yeah, and just as well, a thing that we always forget as well, because especially from risk assessments, we don't always count WCs as outlets because you're not washing your hands in it and stuff. And officially, you should be putting the lid down or the pan down when you're flushing toilets to stop aerosol generation. Doesn't always happen, I know. But the thing to think about as well when you're flushing little used outlets is to think about the WCs. So always give them when you go around, give them a flush as well. Just press a button on the toilets and get them turned over, all of them. So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's probably something that I imagine probably gets missed quite a bit from. We don't see it as an outlet. We see it as something different. We'll leave it there. So the next one that we've got is it's kind of quite a similar one, but we've been flushing our taps and our hair washing stations. Imagine this is a hairdresser's throughout the pandemic. Will this cover us?
Well, it's good to that people are actually identifying the high risk outlets, and I think a hair washing station is a higher risk because you've got aerosol generation, and effectively from a hair washing situation, you're putting the aerosols right in your face as well. So that's I'm really pleased that people are identifying that they are higher risk outlets. But we've been flushing our taps and hair washing stations throughout it's not sufficient to do that. It should be doing all of it. So I'd like to think that all outlets have been flushed, but it's really good that the hair washing outlets have been flushed. The thing to think about as well is we've been in lockdown, what, 4 or 5 months now? It's quite a while.
That's been a long time, hasn't it?
It's been a long time. If you think that your hair washing, your shower head, I've forgotten the words, then your shower head should be quarterly disinfected and cleaned as well. So that hopefully that would have been done. And if that's not been done, that should have been disinfected as well and descaled. So that's something that'd be good. A proprietary descaler, something like a chemical descaler can be absolutely fine. Something that you can do your kettling. that's good enough. That's absolutely fine. I do mine. Give them a flush out and then put a bit of bleach on, because remember the descale is not a disinfectant. It just kills scale off. Once the scale's been removed, that reduces the area for the bacteria to grow on. However, you still need to kill the bacteria, so give it a good flush in cold water and then put some bleach on it. And remember, you shouldn't really mix in descalers and bleach, because if you're not careful, you get a cloud of chlorine gas off, which isn't probably ruin your weekend.
So you need a flush between the two then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. So be careful of that as well. So basically what I'm saying is that don't treat individual outlets in isolation. Think of it as a whole approach. So I'd like everything kind of flushed and gone through, really. Good turnover everywhere. And again, when you're looking about flushing, it's important to look at your risk assessment, look at your schematic, and look at what the assets are that are supplying these outlets. So we've got one of our clients has got basically, well, tens of thousands of litres of water that's stored, and just because you're flushing basically the flushing the showers through every week, it's really not enough, simply because the storage tank itself has got such a large volume of water, would never be turned over by that sort of level of flushing. You'd have to be leaving it on for days, because of them got the rest of the toilets and stuff going off usual use. So in that sort of situation, that we've recommended, or it's all been done actually, a whole storage system disinfection. So kind of there's a lot to it, more than simply just turning on the tap.
I was going to say, Michael, when you've got places with stored water, because obviously I know we've done works in the past where there's been like oversized tanks for the current use of the building. I suppose if we're looking at things like COVID going forward and the impact that's having on all of us and all the businesses out there, is it a matter of that if you've got stored water on site, that if you're going to, the potential is you're going to have reduced people going into these buildings? Is it a matter that they need to start looking at those tanks and thinking about, I don't know, dropping ball valves lower down so there's not as much volume in them? Is that a good approach to take?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with one local authority client. They've got their head office. They're looking at potentially only 30% of staff going back into the office for the foreseeable future. That building wasn't designed for that limited use. So in that sort of situation, we are working with them to make sure that either a combination of float valves being reduced, storage systems completely taken offline, and just like you just said, reducing the volume of water stored. I mean, the British standard back in the day was talking about it should be turned over once every 24 hours, and to be honest, it's not a bad idea really. So to do the maths, occupancy rates, and work out the stored volume of water, make sure that it's turned over in every 24. So that would be a really good idea.
I was going to say, I suppose if we're looking at kind of smaller systems as well, where maybe there's a medium-sized system in there in place, we use kind of loose terms here, is it the type of thing that actually, if there's going to be, say, a 30% reduction, or sorry, there's 60% or 70% reduction in the number of people using those buildings, that mains conversions might be an idea to start looking at, if it's not looking like we're going to get up to a 50 or 100% occupancy like we used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always possible, because a lot of you can't always guarantee the rising supply into the storage system might not be good enough, for basically bypassing. I've got a lot of buildings that I'm overseeing that have got old galvanized barrel pipes that just haven't got the flow. And some of the heights, the water company won't give you the head to get up there. So that's potentially not always suitable. Sometimes it will. Mains conversion is always a good method. But failing that, like you say, just reducing the storage system, even using the existing storage system, it's like a bund, and put the storage tank within there. That could be a means of doing it. So we've got a lot of that going on. And again, remembering having a look at your water fittings and making sure they're suitable for mains conversions. If you've got water heaters, if they're currently vented, they won't be suitable for a direct mains conversion. So you have to think about point of use water heaters. So quite often it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it is all possible, and something that should be part of the long-term strategy for the building. But again, going back to the original point, if you've got storage systems that are large, you get people back in there, you should really be thinking about a full disinfection program. It simply wouldn't be good enough. I'll be very nervous about opening up buildings that had potentially dubious flushing without a thorough disinfection and a sampling regime before people go in and again.
Okay, cool, thank you. Right, so the next one is, what should we do if there's a local lockdown? Do we have to do it all over again?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think the answer is probably yes. But I'd like to think second time around we're all a bit wiser. We've done it all once, and if there are localized lockdowns, which there could be, it could be a second wave in the autumn. Who knows? Don't want to be the bringer of doom, but it's possible.
It doesn't.
Fingers crossed, but it's possible. So in which case, yes, we'll be doing it all again. But I'd like to think now that we've done it all once, we can do it all again. In which case, we could have a proper planned approach to who's going to go into these buildings on a weekly basis, who's going to flush, have we got the appropriate gear to flush, have we got temperature probes are great, have you got a temperature probe to assist with your flushing, do we know where all the outlets are, we've got cleaner sinks that are locked away, are they locked away so people can't get in and flush them? So there's all this sort of things that the kind of practical side that I'd like to think if we had a bit more time around second time round, yeah, so we can get those in place. Thank you. So if you can get that, or make sure all the buildings are locked up, make sure we know where all the outlets are, make sure we're comfortable with exactly who's been trained and who can flush. So we're doing a lot of flushing training at the moment. Make sure people are in place, and we have that element of trust now that people know the seriousness of it, of what they're doing. It's not just a matter of turning on a tap for a minute, walking off. There's quite a bit to it. So we need to make sure that people are fully trained and competent and capable of doing what they should be doing. And again, that the relevant documentation is in place to show and to demonstrate this has been done in a bit of due diligence, really.
Cool, brilliant. So the next question that came out, which is again was a kind of a combined one, was kind of like, how do you actually carry out flushing? Which obviously you've kind of you've talked through there a bit really already around sort of the process around temperature taking of the where the water's coming from to where it's coming out, making sure it matches, and then timing that and jotting it down. One of the things to say again is you'll notice on the box to the right hand side, if you can't see it, there'll be a little orange box with a white arrow. If you click that, it'll pop out. There's a handout there, and what we've actually got in there is we've got one which is a flushing guidance. That will give you a lot of guidance on the kind of points to follow, and it's also got a log on there, so please do download it, use it, it's free, take it away. And as Michael always says, and we probably mention this on just about everything we ever do, it's kind of, if you haven't signed your name next to it, you haven't done it in the eyes of the law. So just make sure you do keep records. Everybody knows where the records are and should be filling them in, and it's kept in a safe place, so you know that these things are being carried out. I don't know if you want to add anything further to that.
Yeah, can I add a couple of supplementary points to that, Andrew? Firstly, think about who you're asking to do the flushing. It's always wise to think about the people, the health of the people that you're asking to flush, because if you had people that are potentially shielding, potentially people are recovering from COVID, people are quite poorly, I'd like to think that we're not going to potentially go and ask them to do things like that. So that's the first question, is to make sure that you're asking fit and healthy people to do the flushing. Secondly, get a bit of training would be good. And which, if that's the case, and finally, then there should be a reduced risk anyway. But the key thing when it comes to flushing is reduction of aerosol generation. Remember that the biggest vector, or the most important vector for transmission of the illness, is the aerosols. Without no aerosols, you can't contract Legionella. Okay, so it's really key to reduce aerosol generation. So how do we do that? So we've already mentioned the process of temperature and time for the physical act of the duration of the flush. But I think it's really important to make people aware that you basically to reduce aerosol generation. So how do you do that? Wash-down basins, for instance, they tend to be a lesser means of generating aerosols, but it's a simple matter of turning on the tap slowly when you open it up. Don't forget the first slug of water is where the majority of the bacteria are. The kind of what if in sampling terms we call the pre-flush. So that's quite often where you get more of the bacteria, the denser numbers of bacteria. So basically, open the tap up slowly, just like the first slug of water go through, and then after a certain period of time, you can open up to a bit more of a bore and let more of the water through. When it comes to showers, a bit more of a challenge. We have quite a local authority works that we're doing at the moment. Quite a lot of them are fixed head. So basically, all we're doing at the moment, and it's the best way of doing it, is to get a sounds a bit rubbish, but what we do is to recognised practice is to put a plastic bag around the shower head itself. So put a plastic bag around the top, you can kind of close it, cut the bottom off it, and then turn the shower on, and all the water kind of goes to the bag and falls out without generating lots of aerosols. So that is a really good way of doing it. It doesn't sound really good, but it's quite a practical way. And again, when you're doing, that's for fixed heads, when you press buttons, that's how it helps. Alternatively, if you can completely, if it's not a fixed head, you can alternatively completely remove the shower head itself. And make sure you don't use little rubber grommet, will always fall out, so make sure that doesn't go down the sink, as quite often it does. So keep hold of that, otherwise you'll be in trouble with your residents. Yeah, so take the shower head off, and again, slowly crank up the hots, let it just dribble through first, and then do the same for, give it a couple of minutes, and then go around to the cold. So it's a good way of doing it as well, just to minimise aerosol generations.
And then is it like wash the head in a bucket or something? Is it to clean the head out?
Yeah, I mean, ideally that should be done on a quarterly basis. It doesn't necessarily have to be done not on a weekly basis, but your shower head should be cleaned on a quarterly basis anyway, and descaled and bacteria killed off with a biocide or a bleach. All right,
brilliant. Thank you very much. So the next question we've got is it's quite a broad one, and it's a one that we get quite a lot, and it's do we do Legionella testing? And testing is always a fun word for Michael and I when we get inquiries, because in our industry, testing doesn't actually mean anything. So sometimes testing can be referring to doing a risk assessment, or sometimes it can be to do with sampling. And I think in this case that they're talking about sampling, which I think you mentioned before, that it may be worth taking a couple of samples. So
yes. So yeah. Well, Legionella, do I need to do Legionella testing? Like you say, we've had come into it. We've had issues in the past with this. I've had a few irate people saying, "Well, why have you not done the testing? What do you mean by testing? We haven't done any sampling." But they actually mean the monthly temperature checks. Well, of course we've done them. Yeah. So we've had a few crosswords in that in the past. So we need to be really clear. So yeah, what do we mean by testing? Well, there you go. So monthly temperature checks. So remember, they should, part of HSG 274 Part 2, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The free download, if you've not got it, there's a task list on there. And one of the things that you need to be doing on there is a monthly temperature check on Sentinels. Remember, Sentinels is the nearest and furthest. So, and then we go into the temperature regimes. So hot's hot, cold's cold. So cold should be less than 20 within a couple of minutes, and your hots should be coming out the outlets at over 50 within a minute. Or stored at over 60 degrees. Okay, so they're sort of temperature regimes that we do the testing on a monthly basis. So that's for our clients. But if we don't do them for you, then you can do them yourself or get somebody else to do them. But they do it on a monthly basis. But when it comes to, so that's the first thing. That's just one of the tasks. So the tasks that you should be doing are, like I say, quarterly shower cleans. Checking clarifiers, making sure drain lines are unclear and the rest of it, potentially cleaning softeners, expansion vessels, servicing appropriately, and TMVs fail safe every 6 months, servicing every year. That's the sort of stuff we should be doing, and an annual storage system inspection this time of year as well. But that's the task list of HSG. But with regards to physical sampling, it's a good question, really. I know there's a regional variation. I'm based in Essex, as you're aware, in Northumberland Water in the northeast. When I first joined the team, kind of 7 years ago, everybody in the northeast does testing, or what I call laboratory testing, all the time. So we used to get a phone call, "Can you come and do my tech samples?" Why? Because we have to. So and yeah, in the south we don't do well, a lot less. So there's a real north-south divide on the sampling, which always makes me chuckle. So the actual, is there a right way? Who knows? But basically, my advice would always be, if you look at the technical guidance, it always says, and it's quite clear in there, and that's what I believe, is that sampling is not a control measure. Your control measures, as we've said thousands of times, the mantra: hot's hot, cold's cold, keep it moving. They're your control measures. Okay, temperature, turnover. Sampling is a means of validation to check that those things have gone ahead, all right, and are working and been efficient. So if you've got any doubts as to whether your control measures are working, then that is the time to take a sample. An example would be, if your building's not been used for a while and you've not been doing any flushing, then by all means go and do it. We're doing some big sampling regimes at the moment for a couple of local authorities, because they have been flushing, but they're not too sure about the efficacy of the flush, and they've got some really vulnerable people using the buildings very shortly. We've had quite a few community centres being used for dementia patients recently as well, and kind of that really high risk people, you really need to be comfortable and confident that your water system is performing as it should, and your Legionella bacteria, you get really no hopefully counts of nothing. So they've been doing a lot of that recently. So there is definitely a place for doing Legionella sampling. And again, it's good to have a test every now and again. Just have a check, see if the systems are really good as you hope they are. So
I was going to say it's a double check, really, isn't it? A kind of just to really kind of sort of dot I's and cross T's. But obviously, like throwing in one here and there is fine, but just sampling upon sampling isn't going to solve any issue. It's just going to say no, you still have a problem because you haven't done anything about the root cause, I guess, for want of a better term.
And again, the sampling regimes should be documented and really kind of formalised. So we've had issues in the past where we might have a bank of 9 showers and people have been taking 9 samples. Well, I don't really think I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do. We've got one of our clients has got a temporary shower block because of COVID, so they've got a storage system outside, a temporary one, and they've got a bank of, I don't know, say 7 showers. So I think the right thing to do is take a sample from the storage tank itself. So you've got the source, and then to take a nearest and furthest from the showers. Again, I think that's you could do post if you want, post flush and pre-flush. That's fine, but just moderate the amount of samples that you're doing. I think if it's a choice of breaking a bank, so therefore we're not going to do anything, or do a few, then I think the latter more than the former.
Would it be sort of like you're talking about, like sort of doing the first and the last shower? Because obviously I'm thinking around like kind of sentinels and how we test them. Is it a matter of you would just do those to do that, or would it be a matter of maybe the next time round you do the next 2 in, and then you do the next 2 in and sort of mix it up a little bit just to double check and make sure there isn't any localized sort of outbreak in those
absolutely. And again, if you get positives returned, we've had a few of these, and then it's a chance to widen the net and really hone in on areas. A bit like battleships, if you think it's there, then crack on. We get a few more localized samples from that particular area. You just get a better picture of what's going on. Incidentally, recently we've had quite a few problems, localized problems, because TMVs have not been serviced. So with all this flushing that's been going on, potentially sediment and scale and the rest of it's been upset within the system and gathering in the strainers. So and we've had potential failures from TMVs that have been letting by back feeding, so that's been an area of concern. So it's just a reminder to basically get your TMV serviced. And just the thing as well, we talked about flushing before. I think it's quite good to think about. We've mentioned the flushing for 2 minutes, or timing it with a temperature probe and a timer to make sure that you're flushing to the supplying asset temperature. So that's what we call a hygienic flush. You can do basically a cleansing flush, which is a lot more thorough, and that would be a better way of what I call recommission a building if it's been stagnant for some time. Yeah, there's no, very low levels of storage. So that would be an idea. Basically, the difference is all you're doing is removing valves like strainers and the rest of it, open up float valves completely, just to give that extra oomph to the resistance out of the fittings, so the water can basically whisk through the pipes a lot faster and just remove any biofilms, because remember, it's the biofilms where the Legionella bacteria really like to live. So, so there's just something to think about as well, really, the 2 different types of flushing that you get. So yeah, cleansing really is the one that is really good for recommission, as opposed to the regular weekly hygienic flush.
Okay, cool. So the next question that we've got coming through here it's from a landlord by the looks of it. So I own a couple of properties which normally have 4 to 6 students living in them, but now I won't have any until September. What should I be doing? I imagine this is because, like, remember back from university days, it was kind of the tenancies kind of butt up against each other, whether you're there or not, don't they? And at the minute, I imagine there's probably a lot of people saying, I'm not willing to put down that money to kind of cover that gap. So there could be empty up until September from now, so a good couple of months.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Again, it's similar to kind of schools, really, isn't it? Schools finishing kind of end of July, and my kids' schools are finishing, and they won't be going back till September. So again, what they're doing in the meantime. So the best practice for all this, as we keep on thrashing out, is a week. It's got to be done a weekly flush to simulate use. So that's what we need to be doing. So it has to be done. And thing to think about as well, if it's students, it's a commercial let, as that would be, you need to have a risk assessment in place. So consult your risk assessment and make sure that's clear what that's up to date and accurate, and it should give you ideas about safe operating of the water system, and it should give you advice in there as to what you should be doing. But certainly on a weekly basis, you should be turning all outlets out. So remember, if you've got a utility room that's not used very often or tucked out of the way, all en suites, all showers, all toilets, every single outlet in there should be flushed on a weekly basis. And the belt and braces approach would be, before reletting it in September, take a sample before, really, or a couple of samples before, just to validate that you control. Yeah, validate your flushing regime. So that'd be the best way of doing it, and update your risk assessment accordingly.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got another one in here, which is it's a bit of a longer one. The building office management team has made us aware that they've only been testing the water in communal areas. We've been running the taps regularly, so everything should be fine, but we feel like we should still test it. What do you recommend? I think, again, they're talking about sampling, I think, when they're saying test.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. So yeah, again, if you're only sampling in communal areas, we've got to get out of this segregated approach. We must start thinking about the whole building holistically. Look at all the outlets. So that's what I'll be recommending, that every single outlet in that building is kind of flushed on a weekly basis. But again, when I say flushing, it's the hygiene flush. But this should also be done in conjunction with your monthly temperature regimes. So when we're doing those sorts of buildings that are not yet used, then really should be looking at that cold, taking that cold, having a good look at that cold temperature, turning that cold tap and taking basically a baseline for that, to make sure that you haven't got a lot of heat gain from the building, or for the localized pipes. So making sure they're under 20 degrees, and how long it takes to flush. So if that's taking a long time to get that under 20 degrees, then potentially you might even be looking for disinfections on that if it's not been used for a while. But as I said before, forget the communal areas per se, you've got to look at the whole building. Okay, so where other parts of the building not being used, it's got to all be looked at. But again, if you can't, I'll be looking at validation samples as well if your temperature regimes are kind of a bit errant, and potentially even a disinfection, depending on the results of those those samples, I should say.
I suppose if they're talking about an office building here, the thing I've got in my head is kind of where you get like multiple little offices in one building. That's kind of a landlorded property, and whether the landlord, you probably have to check the tenant's agreement, I would imagine, because it'll probably be in there what you're required to do and what they're required to do. But it may be that they're only responsible for communal areas and you've got to do your own bit, or it may be that they're doing that. So it's worth checking with your landlord as well, just to see what has been done, what hasn't been done, what do you need to do to get that on board.
Yeah, tenancy agreements can always be tricky. Who gets the repair bill ultimately is probably is going to provide a bit of a clue on that, who's responsible for it. But yeah, they're never easy with the tenancy agreements.
Yeah, brilliant. Let me have a look on this, because I think you might be getting, we've got 2 more questions left unless any more pop up. We are moving our business into a new building that had been empty for a while. Do we need a new risk assessment to be legally covered, as the previous owners didn't have one? My answer would be yes.
Absolutely, yes. Yes. There's just a simple answer, isn't it? Yeah, I would. So yeah, so think about that building itself. It's going to be potentially new people in it, new risks. So think about the makeup of the building itself. You've got new people in there. Potentially, you've got a change in use. So you might have people at higher risk, susceptibility, age, demographics, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it needs a new risk assessment, really. Yeah, definitely.
With something like that, Michael, where obviously like somebody's kind of moving into a new building which has been left for a while, maybe it's been vacant or whatever. Yes, they'll need a risk assessment, because obviously that'll be triggered by new use of building and things. Is that the time where does the risk assessment come first? So do the risk assessment, and that would highlight what they would need to do for the fact that it's been left sort of empty for a while. Is that the normal way to do it?
Well, it tends to never be as sweet as that, but ideally that would be the best place to do it, because as well, I dare say the risk assessment would find areas of concern which would need remedial works. And let's face it, it's going to be easy to complete with remedial works if the building's empty. So ideally, yes, and we've had a few of these where we go in first, complete the risk assessment, and you have to make a best guess as a risk assessor as to the end user. You can only make a best guess, because that's, like I said before, a quite important build-up of the risk assessment is the end user and susceptibility and age demographics, and how many people are in there. If you've got loads of people in there, the risk increases, doesn't it? So so that's something to think about as well, even though the turnover would drop, would increase as well. So yeah, that's something to think about as well. But yeah, definitely, ideally first.
Brilliant. And then we've got one final question, unless any more pop in here. This one actually came through on our when we advertised this webinar Q&A. It's a bit of a strange one for us, isn't it? Came through on LinkedIn, and it was really important. And as we've been going through the questions and the answers that come from that, flushing comes out quite a bit. And obviously, sort of the two bits of what we do is, one is kind of around water efficiency and one's around Legionella, and sometimes they can kind of be the yin and yang of water, where one's kind of saying keep flushing, use your turnover, and the other one's kind of saying be as water efficient as possible. So I think it's probably a good thing for us where we can kind of find that balance. But the question that came through was, do you feel an IoT monitoring solution for Legionella should be part of the health and safety compliance? As this would be cheaper than constant checks and would solve the pain of having to clear the system and waste lots of water in the process, as well as keeping the water healthy.
So I think yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think IoT is going to be a thing, and it's going to be probably become more and more prevalent, particularly in the kind of compliance industry where things have to happen, and it not happening isn't it isn't an allowable excuse. The HSE isn't going to kind of give you a pass because you couldn't get in that day because you couldn't find the keys. It doesn't matter. It still needs to be taken. So I think IoT, the way that the marketplace in Legionella is moving, is that it can replace those temperature checks going forward.
Yeah, I mean,
hopefully save some water.
Yeah, I think I'm a fan. So absolutely, should be part of the health and safety. I'd say could be part. It could be part of it, and I think that the player potentially plays a very valuable role. To me, I could envisage a system where you'd saving water because the physical sensor would measure the pipe temperature. So that would be saving water. So I think that's fantastic. And the good thing as well is what I like about the flushing in the trials that we've done, when we've been asking people to flush. Oh yeah, I've been flushing every day, mate. And you look at the actually, we'll think of well, mentioning too much, but I think of one particular site where the security guard was tasked with flushing the premises, and he was swearing blind. He did it for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it was about 12 seconds when you looked at the data download. It was fantastic. So you could see straight away he wasn't doing it. So I'm a big fan, and I think that linked with automatic flushing devices, I've got to be careful how I word that. Back in the water regulations day, that was always a sticking point. I think things have moved on since then, but when I was doing it years ago, it was a case of, well, you can't fit any fitting that's designed to waste water, which effectively an automatic flushing device is, isn't it?
Yeah.
They had automatic, on urinal controls. There was a bigger hygienic flush was a big issue in the day as well. So because that was exactly the same, if there was nobody in the building, why would you flush urinal? Hygienic flush, can't do it. So there's lots of politics, and again, I'm a bit behind on that, so things probably haven't moved on since in my absence. But yeah, I definitely think there's the player part to play. I'm a big fan. The couple of things that again everybody's talked about is if you think about the IoT solution, you can't get a sensor to clean a shower. You can't get a sensor to go do an annual storage system inspection. So they're not the be all and end all, but I genuinely believe they're going to play a bigger role. Some of my clients really like people going on site on a monthly basis just to check the logbooks out, just to have a walk around and just to say hello. And it's a kind of it's a uniform and it's a badge walking around just to say hello. So people do like that, but I think yeah, as we reach more cheaper solutions, I think it'll be more cost effective. So I think it's coming, and I'll welcome it with open arms.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is the fact that you'll be effectively doing your flush as people use it, because you'll be able to see the temperature differential from that, and then it doesn't need to be flushed because it's not wasted water, I guess. And then I suppose the other thing apart from that, which you'd mentioned before, is the fact that you can see your little used outlets as well, which then allows you to be a bit more targeted. I suppose there's a yin and yang. I think if you've got a big portfolio with thousands of outlets, then the data might become almost too big. So you've got to make sure that someone's actually going to look at it and do some of that data. But I think it's the way the market's going, and I think we'll see a lot more of it sort of migrate into this sort of the Legionella side of thing. I mean, the question mentions health and safety, so I imagine there's probably a million different other applications through the different sort of the big five health and safety sort of compliance measures. But yeah, I definitely think it's something for the future. We'll keep you up to date with our progress and where we are with that. Right, I think that's it. There's no more questions come through. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we really hope that you found this useful. It's a bit of a different format for us, so hopefully you bear with us, and we've give you something at least informative and hopefully somewhat entertaining at best. We'll get this recorded. It's been recorded. We'll get the recording up on the website so people can kind of come back and have another look if they wish, or if you've got business friends who are a bit struggling and need some answers, then maybe this applies for them. So it's the normal webinar section on our website, so you'll be able to get it from there. Again, don't forget we've got the flushing guidance and log that you can download from the webinar. It's also on our webpage. If you go onto our webpage, under the About Us, there's a COVID-19 link. If you click on that, there's a whole list of helpful links which take you to the HSC, the LCA, which is Legionella Control Association, the European body that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation. They've got a raft of information, particularly that investigates Legionella disease, which I can never remember the acronym from, so please do apologise if you are from that organisation.